Hello, my friends. It's been a while since I've done a good old-fashioned car video. Today I wanted to talk to you about a recent article that I read in the New York Times, and it's called "Don't Go Down That Rabbit Hole." And basically this article relates to some of the things that I said in my video about the psychology of conspiracy deniers. It openly is telling the readers of the New York Times that they shouldn't attempt to debunk or refute the arguments of conspiracy theorists or racists online, and that they really, all they should be doing is ignoring them completely. And in a lot of ways, this article is implicitly, and some unintendedly humorous ways, implicitly treating the audience as if they were straight up NPC robots that are sort of programmed and swayed purely on the quantity of information that is given to them. That if they start reading read the article yourself, and you'll see that they treat the reader as if merely by reading and focusing on and spending their time and attention on reading a certain perspective on the world, that they will have their own perspective warped in a way that they can't control, and that they aren't capable, the average reader is not capable of learning other perspectives, learning information from other viewpoints, and still maintaining their own viewpoint on the world. That's the way that these people are treated implicitly by the New York Times. So I'll tell you right now, this idea that just consuming information is going to persuade you or sway you to a certain worldview, it's ridiculous. I've spent my entire life, I spent 12 years of schooling, I spent 4 years in university consuming leftist propaganda bullshit from all sides every day. I even had to write some of it to get by in certain classes, and guess what? I wasn't swayed by the overload of information. I wasn't just blown like a leaf in the wind toward that side, even though it was the amount of information that I was receiving from a leftist perspective was just overwhelming. I wasn't persuaded. So how did that work out? How was that supposed to, how do they explain that? And really, by the way, this is the type of justification that they give when they say things like they need to repeal or revise the First Amendment, and that hate speech should not be free speech, because they have adopted this worldview that people are so malleable and so gullible that just consuming the information is going to cause them to become a racist or a sexist or a conspiracy theorist or whatever, as if they've caught a virus, as if they've caught some kind of infection. And I mean, the very fact that I'm always open to hearing their point of view and debating their point of view and learning as much as I can about their point of view to refute them, where as opposed to them not even wanting to hear a point of view like mine, because they argue that just hearing my point of view is going to cause them to adopt it like it's some kind of mind virus. That should show you what side you're on. Just wanted to say that as well. And it's funny, it's sad, it's honestly a little surprising, and it makes you wonder who the hell is so just beat down, demoralized, and just really beat into a state of complete abject self-deprecation and submission, that they would read this and think to themselves like, yeah, I really need to protect myself from these harmful influences, because oh my gosh, if I just spend a couple of hours reading about the viewpoints of racists, that I could find myself just slipping into that mentality. It's something that this is how people are sucked into this horrible worldview, that they're not careful enough. They're not, they're not strict enough with how they spend their attention and how they allocate their focus, that they could just find themselves unintentionally reading about racist ideas or conspiracy theories and then just falling down the rabbit hole. It could happen to anybody. It's really a disturbing worldview. And at first, when I start reading things like this, my first reaction is that this is so belittling and so condescending to humanity in general, and especially to our people in general, that it makes me upset. It makes me frustrated. It gets me angry, because they're telling people that they're incapable of thinking for themselves, that they're incapable of, thinking critically. And if they're so sure that racist or conspiracy theory ideas are nonsense, then why don't they come debunk it? Why don't they come refute it? If they're so afraid to consume the information, if consuming the information is something that they're afraid will convince them or persuade them, then aren't they afraid that it's correct, that there's something true in what racists or conspiracy theorists are saying? And isn't the internet one of these things that ideally was meant to give everybody an equal footing in terms of access to information, and something that ideally allows everybody to become somewhat of experts on anything? That if you have the time, the inclination, the energy to devote hours and hours of research into any topic, and that's the beauty of the internet, is that you now have this access to something that can make you an expert on anything, because that's how intelligence should work. This is my naive worldview. That's how intelligence should work. If you are an intelligent person, then there's no, intelligence is not something that is relegated to a single subject. Intelligence is a general concept. And if you're intelligent in general, as I think naively I used to think most humans were, then you can apply that intelligence to anything. That the understanding of one subject, in principle, is the same method or methodology of understanding that you would apply to any other subject. There's no specialized methodology of understanding. Understanding is something that is a general applied concept, and the way that you can learn concepts in math is the same way that you can learn concepts in biology or history or physics or engineering. This is how I used to think about the world. And I do, to some extent, still think about the world in this way. I do believe that intelligence works that way. That there's no such thing as expert understanding or expert knowledge that is inaccessible to the average person, as long as you have intelligence as an average person. There's no concept that an expert or authority, sorry, I'm fixing my camera. There's no concept that an expert, well, I'm just gonna hold it because it fell off the hook. But there's no concept that an expert or an authority on a subject can grasp that anybody else can't grasp. It's something that, if it's understandable, if a concept is intelligible, then any intelligent person can grasp it. You don't have to be a PhD holder in a certain subject to have a general understanding of the subject. Okay, so that's my naive perspective, is that it makes me upset that the establishment now is telling people that they're not qualified to understand things, and that if they're not an expert, they shouldn't even attempt to read something that is outside of the mainstream, because they're not qualified to refute it or to engage in it. And that in doing so, they will just be swayed by the information, swayed by the arguments, because they're basically robots that are programmed by whatever information is ready at hand. That is condescending, a belittling, a very disturbing view of mankind to my naive perspective. But then I thought about it again, okay? I thought about it again and considered the fact that, yeah, most people are these programmable idiots that are incapable of genuine critical thought, that are swayed by a myriad of social pressures, including whatever is just close at hand, whatever information is fed to them through repetition, through ease of access, and they're just swayed. It's just a psychological pressure, a social pressure that determines where their mindset is at. And the New York Times advising their readers to just ignore information that is contrary to the mainstream, or information that is threatening to the mainstream, to the establishment, is actually an effective strategy. And that the fact of the matter is, this is one of the only effective strategies, because if somebody is open-minded, if somebody does try to approach quote-unquote conspiracies or quote-unquote racist thought, that chances are they will be swayed, they will be persuaded, because the mainstream establishment worldview of open-ended, unqualified multiculturalism, of this idea that the races of humanity are all the same, there's no difference, between the races, besides skin color, that the sexes are the exact same, that democracy is how the world is run, we the people have the power. All of these kinds of like idiotic mainstream establishment ideas are really only maintained in the minds of the public through the types of social pressure manipulation that I was just mentioning. Repetition, arguments from authority, arguments from emotion, and basically trauma-based mind control that children are put under, where they're shown examples of atrocities, of oppression, of just horrible emotional situations, and that's how they're kept under control, essentially, through these kinds of psychological and social pressures. That if somebody were to shake that conditioning, somehow get through that conditioning, and with an open-minded, critical eye approach these opposing worldviews, they would be swayed. Because it is these worldviews, these opposing worldviews, that actually have sense, common sense, and evidence, and good arguments, and reasoning behind them. And it is these opposing worldviews that have been maintained and have persisted despite the overwhelming social pressures and psychological pressures that have been thrust against the people who hold them. So, yeah, in a way, if you're looking at it as a tactic, as just a stratagem of the enemy to keep us dissidents out of any kind of influence or power, then yeah, it's an effective strategy, and it's one of the best strategies that they could come up with, really, because reasoning and critical thinking aren't on their side. Anyway, that's all I have to say for today. Thank you for watching.